There was a blind girl who hated herself purely for the fact she was blind. The only person she didn't hate was her loving boyfriend, as he was always there for her. She said that if she could only see the world, she would marry him. One day, someone donated a pair of eyes to her. Now she could see everything, including her boyfriend. Her boyfriend asked her, "Now that you can see the world, will you marry me?" The girl was shocked when she saw that her boyfriend was blind too, and refused to marry him. Her boyfriend walked away in tears, and later wrote a letter to her saying, "Just take care of my eyes, dear." Moral: when our circumstances change, so does our mind. Some people may not be able to see the way things were before and might not be able to appreciate them. There are many things to take away from this story, not just one. This is one of the inspirational short stories that left me speechless. Once there was a very noble named Arthur who was captured by his neighboring king. Enemy could have killed him, but enemy king knew that he was very wise and noble king. So he offered him freedom, but on one condition. He would have to figure out an answer, and even if after a year, Arthur wouldn't be able to answer, then he would be put to death. Question was, what does a woman really want? Even most knowledgeable wouldn't be able to answer that. But still, Arthur accepted enemy king preposition as it was better than death. Arthur returned to his kingdom and began to ask everyone about it, but no one was able to give any satisfactory answer. Many people advised him to consult an old witch, but she was famous for charging exorbitant prices. For a whole year, Arthur avoided going to witch, but last day came and he had no other option but to go to witch. He went to her and told him about his problem. Witch agreed to help him, but for a price in return. Price was, witch wanted to marry Gwen, most noble knight and Arthur's closet friend. Arthur was horrified to know price as witch was very ugly looking, hideous, and smelled very bad. Arthur didn't want to force his friend to marry such repugnant creature, so he refused. Later, Gwen got to know about witch proposal and talked to Arthur. Same night, Gwen and witch wedding was proclaimed, and witch answered Arthur question. Answer was, what woman really want is to be in charge of her own life. Arthur went back to neighboring kingdom, and enemy king was satisfied by answer, and hence granted Arthur his freedom. Even after getting his freedom back, Arthur was not happy, because for this, his best friend Gwen had to marry an old witch. Next day, honeymoon hour approached. Gwen prepared his mind for worst, but to his surprise, inside room was awaiting the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Witch said to Gwen, "I would be horrible and ugly witch half the time, and beautiful maiden self for half. Which would you want me to be during the day, and which during the night? Would you prefer a beautiful maiden during to show off to your friends, but at night, an old witch? Or would you prefer an old hideous witch during day, but by night, a beautiful woman to be with?" Gwen replied, "I would like you to choose that for yourself." Hearing this, witch announced that she would be beautiful all the time because he had respected her enough to be in charge of her life. Moral: treat woman with respect and let her be the one to decide for herself. There was a farmer who sold a pound of butter to a baker. One day, the baker decided to weigh the butter to see if he was getting the right amount, which he wasn't. Angry about this, he took the farmer to court. The judge asked the farmer if he was using any measure to weight the butter. The farmer replied, "Honor, I am primitive. I don't have a proper measure, but I do have a scale." The judge asked, "Then how do you weigh the butter?" The farmer replied, "Your Honor, long before the baker started buying butter from me, I have been buying a pound loaf of bread from him. Every day when the baker brings the bread, I put it on the scale and give him the same weight in butter. If anyone is to be blamed, it is the baker." Moral: in life, you get what you give. Don't try and cheat others. There once was a king who decided to do a little experiment. He had a giant boulder put right in the middle of the street. He then hid near the boulder to see who, if anyone, would try to move it out of the way. First, some wealthy merchants walked by. They walked around the boulder, complaining that the king hasn't been maintaining the roads very well. Next, a peasant walked by, heading home with his arms full of food for his family. When he noticed the boulder, he put his groceries down and attempted to move it out of everyone's way. It took him a while to move it, but he eventually succeeded. If you're able to push through moments that are challenging, you may end up being much better off than you were before you started trying. After the peasant gathered up his groceries to carry on home, he noticed a bag lying in the middle of the road, just where the boulder once was. He opened the bag to find that it was stuffed full of gold coins, along with a letter from the king saying that the bag's gold was a reward for the peasant to keep because he had taken the time and energy to move the boulder out of the road for the convenience of others who would be traveling the road in the future. The moral: the peasant in this story was taught by the king that every obstacle you face offers an opportunity to improve. If you're able to push through moments that are challenging, you may end up being much better off than you were before you started trying. This story also offers a lesson of personal responsibility. If you see a job ahead of you, don't leave it for the next person to do. Rather, step up and get the job done to help the people who come after you. A farmer had a dog who used to sit by the roadside waiting for vehicles to come around. As soon as one came, he would run down the road, barking and trying to overtake it. One day, a neighbor asked the farmer, "Do you think your dog is ever going to catch a car?" The farmer replied, "That is not what bothers me. What bothers me is what he would do if he ever caught one." Many people in life behave like that dog who is pursuing meaningless goals. A 6-year-old boy was in the market with his 4-year-old sister. Suddenly, the boy found that his sister was lagging behind. He stopped and looked back. His sister was standing in front of a toy shop and was watching something with great interest. The boy went back to her and asked, "Do you want something?" The sister pointed at the doll. The boy held her hand and, like a responsible elder brother, gave that doll to her. The sister was very, very happy. The shopkeeper was watching everything and getting amused to see the matured behavior of the boy. Now the boy came to the counter and asked the shopkeeper, "What is the cost of this doll, sir?" The shopkeeper was a cool man and had experienced the odds of life, so he asked the boy with a lot of love and affection, "Well, what can you pay?" The boy took out all the shells that he had collected from seashore from his pocket and gave them to the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper took the shells and started counting as if he were counting the currency. Then he looked at the boy. The boy asked him worriedly, "Is it less?" The shopkeeper said, No, these are more than the cost, so I will return the remaining." Saying so, he kept only 4 shells with him and returned the remaining. The boy very happily kept those shells back in his pocket and went away with his sister. A servant in that shop got very surprised watching all these. He asked his master, "Sir, you gave away such a costly doll just for 4 shells." The shopkeeper said with a smile, "Well, for us these are mere shells, but for that boy, these shells are very precious. And at this age, he does not understand what money is. But when he will grow up, he definitely will. And when he would remember that he purchased a doll with the shells instead of money, he will remember me and think that world is full of good people. He will develop positive thinking. That's it." A 10-year-old boy decided to study judo despite the fact that he had lost his left arm in a devastating car accident. The boy began lessons with an old Japanese judo master. The boy was doing well, so he couldn't understand why. After 3 months of training, the master had taught him only one move. "Sensei," teacher in Japanese. The boy finally said, "Shouldn't I be learning more moves? This is the only move you know, but this is the only move you'll ever need to know." The sensei replied, not quite understanding, but believing in his teacher. The boy kept training. Several months later, the sensei took the boy to his first tournament. Surprising himself, the boy easily won his first 2 matches. The third match proved to be more difficult, but after some time, his opponent became impatient and charged. The boy deftly used his one move to win the match. Still amazed by his success, the boy was now in the finals. This time, his opponent was bigger, stronger, and more experienced. For a while, the boy appeared to be overmatched. Concerned that the boy might get hurt, the referee called a timeout. He was about to stop the match when the sensei intervened. "No," the sensei insisted. "Let him continue." Soon after the match resumed, his opponent made a critical mistake. He dropped his guard. Instantly, the boy used his move to pin him. The boy had won the match and the tournament. He was the champion. On the way home, the boy and sensei reviewed every move in each and every match. Then the boy summoned the courage to ask what was really on his mind. "Sensei, how did I win the tournament with only one move?" "You won for 2 reasons," the sensei answered. "First, you've almost mastered one of the most difficult throws in all of judo. And second, the only known defense for that move is for your opponent to grab your left arm." The boy's biggest weakness had become his biggest strength. Moral: sometimes we feel that we have certain weaknesses and we blame God, the circumstances, or ourselves for it. But we never know that our weaknesses can become our strengths one day. Each of us is special and important. So never think you have any weakness. Never think of pride or pain. Just live your life to its fullest and extract the best out of it. During Mark's first month of college, The professor gave his students a pop quiz. He was a conscientious student and had breezed through the questions until he read the last one. What is the first name of the woman who cleans the school? Surely this was some kind of joke. He had seen the cleaning woman several times. She was tall, dark-haired, and in her 50s. But how would he know her name? He handed in his paper, leaving the last question blank. Just before class ended, one student asked if the last question would count toward the quiz grade. "Absolutely," said the professor. "In your careers, you will meet many people. All are significant. They each deserve your attention and care, even if all you do is smile and say hello." Mark never forgot that lesson. He also learned her name was Dorothy. Everyone in your life is everyone, just like the people you give importance to. A carpenter who was nearing retirement told his boss that he was ready to end his career and spend his time with his wife and family. He would miss his work, but he felt it was time to spend his time with the people who were important to him. His boss was saddened by this news, as this carpenter had been a good, reliable employee for many years. He asked the carpenter if he could do him a favor and build just one more house. The carpenter reluctantly conceded, even though his passion for building had faded. While he was building this last house, his normal work ethic faded, and his efforts were mediocre at best. He used inexpensive and inferior materials and cut corners wherever he could. It was a poor way to finish such a dedicated career that he once had. When the carpenter was finished, his boss came to look at the house. He gave the key to the carpenter and said, "This house is my gift to you for all of the hard work you have done for me over the years." The carpenter was astonished. What a generous gift this was to receive from his boss. But if he had known he was building a house for himself, he would have made his usual efforts to create a high-quality home. The moral: the same idea applies to how you build your life. Every day that you wake up offers an opportunity for you to put your best foot forward. Yet we often do mediocre work, saving the more important things for another day. Then one day, we find ourselves shocked that our lives aren't what we had hoped they would be. The house we built to live in has a lot of flaws due to a lack of effort. However, you can't go back and rebuild it in a day or two. As people say, life is a do-it-yourself project. Your attitude and choices help build the life you will live tomorrow. Build carefully. A wise man once faced a group of people who were complaining about the same issues over and over again. One day, instead of listening to the complaints, he told them a joke and everyone cracked up laughing. Then, the man repeated the joke. A few people smiled. Finally, the man repeated the joke a third time, but no one reacted. The man smiled and said, "You won't laugh at the same joke more than once. So what are you getting from continuing to complain about the same problem?" The moral: you're not going to get anywhere if you keep complaining about the same problem, but do nothing to fix it. Don't waste your time complaining, expecting other people to continue to react to your complaints. Instead, take action to make a change. A philosophy professor once stood up before his class with a large empty mayonnaise jar. He filled the jar to the top with large rocks and asked his students if the jar was full. His students all agreed the jar was full. He then added small pebbles to the jar and gave the jar a bit of a shake so the pebbles could disperse themselves among the larger rocks. Then he asked again, "Is the jar full now?" The students agreed that the jar was still full. The professor then poured sand into the jar to fill up all the remaining empty space. The students then agreed again that the jar was full. The metaphor: in this story, the jar represents your life and the rocks, pebbles, and sand are the things that fill up your life. The rocks represent the most important projects and things you have going on, such as spending time with your family and maintaining proper health. This means that if the pebbles and the sand were lost, the jar would still be full and your life would still have meaning. The pebbles represent the things in your life that matter, but that you could live without. The pebbles are certainly things that give your life meaning, such as your job, house, hobbies, and friendships. but they are not critical for you to have a meaningful life. These things often come and go, and are not permanent or essential to your overall well-being. Finally, the sand represents the remaining filler things in your life and material possessions. This could be small things such as watching television, browsing through your favorite social media site, or running errands. These things don't mean much to your life as a whole, and are likely only done to waste time or get small tasks accomplished. The moral. The metaphor here is that if you start with putting sand into the jar, you will not have room for rocks or pebbles. This holds true with the things you let into your life. If you spend all of your time on the small and insignificant things, you will run out of room for the things that are actually important. In order to have a more effective and efficient life, pay attention to the rocks, because they are critical to your long-term well-being. Once two companies are competitors in selling toothpaste and toothbrushes for adults. After a few years, there were requirements at the market for toothbrushes for kids. Both the companies are well aware that the company which comes out with the product first will have a higher probability of dominating the market. The first company went with the logical approach instead of doing field research. Since adults have big hands, they need long and thick toothbrushes, whereas kids have smaller hands. They need a small handle and thin bristle toothbrushes. So, without any second thought, and to gain the market share, they designed and produced the kids' toothbrush in a few weeks and launched it in the market. On the other side, the second company did extensive field research. They went to hundreds of kids and observed how they held the toothbrush and brushed their teeth. They also took feedback from kids directly on their likings. After the research, the second company decided that kids need toothbrushes similar to adults in handle length, with some grooves and smaller bristles. The reason is, kids clung to the toothbrush instead of holding the toothbrush in their fingers as adults. Thus, instead of making a small handle toothbrush, they went with a toothbrush with a long handle, which helps to hold the brush effectively. In addition, they added different colors and cartoon characters to the toothbrush to make it more attractive for the kids. They launched the toothbrush in the market and sold a record number of toothbrushes in a few months. They started dominating the market and increased their market share. We should have patience in building our knowledge and understanding of what is required to achieve our goal. The quality time we spend on the initial stages helps to gain confidence in the longer run. Never go for shortcuts. It will give us only instant success and then fades away. But to maintain it consistently, we need patience. About 100 years ago, a man looked at the morning newspaper and, to his surprise and horror, read his name in the obituary column. The newspapers had reported the death of the wrong person by mistake. His first response was shock. Am I here or there? When he regained his composure, his second thought was to find out what people had said about him. The obituary read, "Dynamite King dies," and also, "He was the merchant of death." This man was the inventor of dynamite, and when he read the words, "merchant of death," he asked himself a question: is this how I am going to be remembered? He got in touch with his feelings and decided that this was not the way he wanted to be remembered. From that day on, he started working toward peace. His name was Alfred Nobel, and he is remembered today by the Great Nobel Prize. Just as Alfred Nobel got in touch with his feelings and redefined his values, we should step back and do the same. What is your legacy? How would you like to be remembered? Will you be spoken well of? Will you be remembered with love and respect? Will you be missed? In a small Italian town, hundreds of years ago, a small business owner owed a large sum of money to a loan shark. The loan shark was a very old, unattractive-looking guy that just so happened to fancy the business owner's daughter. He decided to offer the businessman a deal that would completely wipe out the debt he owed him. However, the catch was that we would only wipe out the debt if he could marry the businessman's daughter. Needless to say, this proposal was met with a look of disgust. The loan shark said that he would place 2 pebbles into a bag, one white and one black. The daughter would then have to reach into the bag and pick out a pebble. If it was black, the debt would be wiped, but the loan shark would then marry her. If it was white, the debt would also be wiped, but the daughter wouldn't have to marry the loan shark. Standing on a pebble-strewn path in the businessman's garden, the loan shark bent over and picked up 2 pebbles. Whilst he was picking them up, the daughter noticed that he'd picked up 2 black pebbles and placed them both into the bag. He then asked the daughter to reach into the bag and pick one. The daughter naturally had 3 choices as to what she could have done. Refuse to pick a pebble from the bag, take both pebbles out of the bag and expose the loan shark for cheating, pick a pebble from the bag fully well knowing it was black, and sacrifice herself for her father's freedom. She drew out a pebble from the bag, and before looking at it, accidentally dropped it into the midst of the other pebbles. She said to the loan shark, "Oh, how clumsy of me. Never mind. If you look into the bag for the one that is left, you will be able to tell which pebble I picked. The pebble left in the bag is obviously black, and seeing as the loan shark didn't want to be exposed, he had to play along as if the pebble the daughter dropped was white and clear her father's debt." Morale: it's always possible to overcome a tough situation through out-of-the-box thinking and not give in to the only options you think you have to pick from. In a beautiful village, there was a family of 4. They moved to the city to start a business. With their little savings and financial help from their close circle, they opened a shop. On the first day of opening the shop, there were no customers. And in the first week, there were no customers. Even after a month, there were no customers. During these difficult times, the family didn't lose hope. Every day the man woke up early and got ready to open the shop. His wife prepared food for him. In the night, he closed his shop late. They were having only 1 meal per day, but they never give up. After close to 2 months, they had their first customer. He treated his customer well and gave quality products. With quality service to the first customer and through word of mouth, he started receiving more customers to his shop. And it was no looking back for him after his first customer. Now, it's been 20 years since he started. His business has grown big and now has multiple branches across the city. His son and daughter also started managing his business. Still, every day the man wakes up early. The lady now cooks for both her children and her husband. They opened their shop early and closed their shop late. They were patient and never gave up. Moral of the story: time can test our patience, though we should never let ourselves down. Develop the never give up attitude and build patience to get success. John and Alex were working in an IT company. Both were part of the same department but in different projects. Their projects achieved on-time delivery and with less budget. Also, they made many innovations in their project. Both were a nomination for the Star Performance Award at the organization level. John and Alex prepared themselves for the presentation to the management. After the presentation, they were eagerly waiting for the final results. Finally, John was declared the winner. Alex, instead of congratulating John, "This award is not worth much. They will give this to people randomly. Anyway, I was not expecting it." Moral of the story: never insult the things which we want, but do not get it. There will be another chance. We might have put a lot of effort into that. But there are 2 reasons why we did not get it. The effort we gave was not enough, or the other person might have put more effort than you. So instead of insulting it, we need to put more than 100% of our effort into getting it. As a group of frogs was traveling through the woods, 2 of them fell into a deep pit. When the other frogs crowded around the pit and saw how deep it was, they told the 2 frogs that there was no hope left for them. However, the 2 frogs decided to ignore what the others were saying, and they proceeded to try and jump out of the pit. Despite their efforts, the group of frogs at the top of the pit were still saying that they should just give up, that they would never make it out. Eventually, one of the frogs took heed to what the others were saying, and he gave up, falling down to his death. The other frog continued to jump as hard as he could. Again, The crowd of frogs yelled at him to stop the pain and just die. He jumped even harder and finally made it out. When he got out, the other frog said, "Did you not hear us?" The frog explained to them that he was deaf. He thought they were encouraging him the entire time. Moral: people's words can have a big effect on others' lives. Think about what you say before it comes out of your mouth. It might just be the difference between life and death. I would like to share a beautiful story of positive thinking that I read a couple of days ago. One day, a professor entered the classroom and announced a surprise test. Hearing this, all students got anxious and started thinking about what would come up in the test. The professor distributed the question paper with the front side facing down. After handing over the papers to all the students, he asked them to turn the page and start the test. To everyone's surprise, there were no questions in the test paper. There was just a black dot in the center of the page. Everyone was startled and looked at the professor in awe. The professor told the students, "I want you to write a few lines about what you see on the paper." All the students were stupefied, but since they didn't have a choice, they started writing the answer. Once everyone was through with the test, the professor collected all the answer sheets and started reading out each answer aloud in front of the whole class. Without an exception, all the students had written about the black dot, mentioning about its position, size, etc. After reading out all the answers, the professor addressed the students and told them, "None of you will be graded on this test. I just wanted you to ponder over something. All of you wrote about the black dot. No one wrote about the white part of the paper. The same thing happens in our lives too. We all have a white paper to observe and learn from, yet we always focus on the dark spots. We have so many reasons to celebrate: our parents, co-workers, friends, good health, a satisfactory job, a child's smile, the miracles we witness every day, and so on. However, we simply limit our horizons by focusing on just the dark spots, our disappointments, our frustrations, our fears and anxieties, things that bother us, people that wronged us, etc. In our day-to-day lives, we tend to take so many good things for granted and focus our energy on insignificant dot-like failures and disappointments. Though these dark spots are quite small as compared to the good things that we have in our lives, yet they perturb our minds and do not let us think positively. Take your eyes away from the black dots of your life. Try and focus on the brighter side of life and let positivity govern your thoughts. A boy and his father went to a zoo. There they saw a huge elephant that was tied to a beam with a chain. After seeing this, the boy asked his father, "You told me elephant is one of the strongest animals, and why it's not able to break the small chain to get itself free?" His father replied, "Son, the elephant when it was young was tied with a similar chain, and it didn't have strength at that time to break away. As the days went, its mind was tuned such a way that it doesn't have the strength to break the chain. Now, even though it has strength, they believe that the chain can still hold them, and it cannot be broken." Like this elephant, how many of us are still stuck in our life, saying we can't do this? Just because you fall once doesn't mean you're failing at everything. Keep trying, hold on, and always trust yourself, because if you don't, then who will? Marilyn Monroe. Moral of the story: never stop trying and underestimate your strength against the resistance, like the chain which is stopping you against your growth. Once, a psychology professor walked around his classroom full of students holding a glass of water, with his arms straightened out to the side. He asked his students, "How heavy is this glass of water?" The students started to shout out guesses ranging anywhere from 4 ounces to 1 pound. The professor replied, "The absolute weight of this glass isn't what matters while I'm holding it. Rather, it's the amount of time that I hold on to it that makes an impact. If I hold it for, say, 2 minutes, it doesn't feel like much of a burden. If I hold it for an hour, its weight may become more apparent as my muscles begin to tire, If I hold it for an entire day or week, my muscles will cramp and I'll likely feel numb or paralyzed with pain, making me feel miserable and unable to think about anything aside from the pain that I'm in. In all of these cases, the actual weight of the glass will remain the same, but the longer I clench onto it, the heavier it feels to me, and the more burdensome it is to hold. The class understood and shook their heads in agreement. The professor continued to say, "This glass of water represents the worries and stresses that you carry around with you every day. If you think about them for a few minutes and then put them aside, it's not a heavy burden to bear. If you think about them a little longer, you will start to feel the impacts of the stress. If you carry your worries with you all day, you will become incapacitated, prohibiting you from doing anything else until you let them go. Put down your worries and stressors. Don't give them your entire attention while your life is passing you by. Don't carry your worries around with you everywhere you go, as they will do nothing but bring you down." The moral: let go of things that are out of your control. Don't carry your worries around with you everywhere you go, as they will do nothing but bring you down. Put your glass down each night and move on from anything that is unnecessarily stressing you out. Don't carry this extra weight into the next day.